on the day when Augustine, the ruler of the Eastern District, got engaged to the daughter of a powerful family, he dealt with a group of women, those fluttering around him like butterflies. Some wanted money, others wanted power, and there were also those who longed for a bit of Augustine's love. When it was my turn, he sat behind his desk and asked me, "Oriana, what do you want?" I thought for a moment, then said, quite vulgarly, that I wanted 4 houses and 3 luxury cars. I had been by his side for 7 years. Counting the years, 1 gift for each, it seemed fair enough. Now, I no longer wished to say those polite lies like, "I don't want money, I just want you." Chapter 1. When I was 20, I was given to Augustine as a gift. At that time, I had just started my career, gaining some recognition in online short dramas thanks to my looks, landing a few decent supporting roles. I never expected to meet the wrong people. My manager sold me off, and I was tricked into signing an unequal contract. The new company appeared to be in the film industry, but in reality, it was run as a side business. They packaged us, these small-time celebrities, as high-end products, distinguishing us from those plastic surgery influencers, and were eager to arrange different wealthy patrons for us. Augustine, however, was not on that list. He was the ruler of the East District. Forget whether the company could even reach his level. Even if there were connections, no one dared to make a move on him. He wasn't just a man with a name in the East District. Some said he was cold and hard to approach. Others said he was ruthless and his methods unpredictable. In short, he was a very difficult person to deal with. Maybe I was just lucky. After repeatedly feigning illness to avoid the company's push for me to drink with a middle-aged boss in his 40s, I happened to run into Augustine, who was discussing business at a club. One was a lecherous middle-aged man with no ambition, and the other was a young, powerful figure. I think anyone in my position would have made the same choice. At that time, I was only 20. I had never been in a serious relationship. Just thinking about having to lie in bed with various greasy men, crying over my pathetic soul, made me feel like the sky was about to collapse. So, I mustered all my strength to push away my manager, who was holding me. I pretended to trip and fell at Augustine's feet. Looking back, that was probably the most awkward moment of my acting career. On the surface, I tried to act like it was an accident. In reality, I was so nervous that I couldn't hide my fear. And my desperate, last-ditch attempt. I was even so anxious that before Augustine called over his bodyguard, I reached up and clung to his sleeve, gazing at him with pleading eyes, saying, "Sir, could you help me?" That day, I wore light makeup and a simple t-shirt and white skirt. I looked like I had an agenda, but in reality, I was nervous inside. I was afraid I wasn't pretty enough, afraid I wouldn't attract Augustine's attention. I knew I had a good-looking face, but there are too many beautiful people in this world, especially for someone like Augustine, who wielded power. It wasn't a big deal to him. Luckily, before I left, my manager Roxana had said a wise thing while dressing me up. Being soft and fragile is what these old men love most. When they were young, they had nothing. They loved the woman who supported them through their struggles. And once they became wealthy, they sought to relive their lost youth through young girls. It seems men can never escape the nostalgia for their youth, just like the recurring rescue the prostitute plot in traditional operas. A delicate, fragile young body always invokes a bit of pity. That day, Augustine was lounging on a leather sofa, legs crossed, in a relaxed posture. He gazed at me silently with lowered eyes, making me feel like I was sitting on pins and needles. I couldn't read his mind, and I was so nervous that my back was soaked in cold sweat. It wasn't until his cool fingers gently lifted my chin, and his deep black eyes locked onto mine, that I felt as if he had seen straight through my soul. I heard his low, textured voice say, "What's your name?" He asked for my name. It was a good sign. I sighed in relief, thinking I might succeed, and whispered, "Oriana. My name is Oriana." I thought he would ask more questions. To my surprise, he just coldly replied, and then said, "All right, I'll remember it." He waved his hand, signaling Roxana, who had been too scared to speak, to take me away. I was stunned. When you're young, It's hard to hide your emotions. After I realized what had happened, my face drained of color, and I felt like my life was over. All I could think about was the massive breach of contract penalty I couldn't afford, and how I was about to leave the industry. When I got back, Roxana pointed her finger at me and yelled, "Oriana, don't you want to help your dying mother? You dare provoke Augustine? Do you want to drag everyone down with you? Do you even know your own worth?" Just a few days ago, the hottest newcomer, Helen, tried to get close to him and was immediately cut off from all resources. "What makes you think you have a chance?" I stood there, feeling hopeless, as she yelled at me, unexpectedly. Halfway through her rant, she got a call. I saw her answer, surprised at first, then hesitantly nodding and finally hanging up, her expression changing as she looked at me. My heart skipped a beat. That night, I was sent to a villa in the northern part of the city with my termination contract. As a gift, I was given to Augustine. Chapter 2. I spent 7 years by Augustine's side. I was also the only one who successfully approached him using poor acting skills during those years. For such a unique situation, many people like to romanticize it as, "He is different with you," or "You are special." As a girl who came to the capital to make a living, I wasn't immune to such fantasies. Sometimes, I would wonder, why did Augustine fall for my tricks in the first place? When he was in a good mood, he would stroke my back lazily and say, "Maybe it's because your acting is good." I could tell he was teasing me. In fact, Augustine wasn't as unpredictable as people made him out to be. On the contrary, most of the time, he was very quiet, with only me chattering away beside him. By all logic, my noise should not have fit the market at the time. Maybe he also felt that it would be too lonely to remain silent in this vast villa. But if you were to judge Augustine's character based solely on his good temper, it would be a bit too naive. About half a year after I was brought to his side, I was first allowed to accompany him to Miami for business. At that time, I was young and curious about everything, though I had already heard about some of his methods and influence. I still thought society was either about wealth and power or pure black and white morality. At worst, it would be just like in those dramas, where I'd pretend to see and hear nothing and protect myself. But when Augustine forcibly gripped my hand and made me hold the knife, cutting off that white man's hand, I was paralyzed with fear, my insides cramping uncontrollably. I remember running outside to vomit for a long time, but I could not stop hearing the man's agonizing screams in my ears, until, eventually, the screams faded. I was trembling all over, unable to even imagine what I had witnessed in my mind. Only cold sweat continuously poured down my neck and soaked into my clothes. Luckily, the hairs on my body stood on end, making me sensitive to everything around me. This allowed me to notice Augustine's indifferent, uninterested expression when he came out and looked at me. In summary, it was boredom. My heart skipped a beat. Boredom, that was deadly, especially for someone like me, a newly promoted lover. I was panicked at that moment, so much so that when I look back now, I'm astonished by my own reaction, whether I was truly scared or just young and fearless. I dared to seduce Augustine in the backseat of the Maybach on our way back to the hotel. With poor acting and a disorganized posture, I actively surrendered. Chapter 3. Honesty is always the ultimate weapon. The day Roxana handed me over to Augustine, she gave me one final piece of advice. Don't flatter him. Don't try to be seductive. Just keep your natural self, and how long you can hold on will be your fate. So, when it came to intimacy, Augustine always took the lead, and I passively endured. I had never been bold or proactive. Augustine, however, was a man of restraint. He had strong self-control, and only on rare occasions, when something bothered him, would he have his assistant call me to bring me over. Sometimes, it was just to sleep with him. Other times, he would quietly sit beside me, listening to me recount stories about my experiences on set. I would chatter away, dry-mouthed, unsure how much he actually listened to, or if he simply saw me as a lullaby machine. Seeing him always half closed his eyes, I dared not ask any further. So, in these past 7 years, many people couldn't understand why I had stayed by Augustine's side for so long. As for my looks, I wasn't the most beautiful. As for my temperament, I could be a bit impulsive and talkative. I had often gotten into conflicts with others over that. Some fellow girls seriously analyzed it for me. Maybe he really likes you. I think so too. Otherwise, why would he treat you so well? After hearing it often, I began to entertain some fleeting thoughts. Was there something truly unique about me in Augustine's eyes? After all, for someone like me, just over 20, falling for Augustine had been an incredibly easy thing to do. Chapter 4. After Augustine brought me into his life, not only did my debts to the company disappear, but even my mother, who had been ill for many years, was given the best medical care, though to others, these were just the most insignificant benefits of being with him. I was truly grateful to him from the bottom of my heart. My mother had been sick for many years, and our family savings had long been drained. My father, unable to bear the pressure, chose to escape and left my mother and me. If it hadn't been for my former manager discovering me and helping me earn a little money, my mother might not have survived to this point. He helped me, but also sold me. Our relationship could be defined as that of a patron and a horse, or as enemies. But Augustine was different. It was hard for me to define the relationship between us. So, when we passed by the hospital, and he suggested that we visit my mother, I thought it was just a polite gesture from him. Augustine had always been a dignified man. My mother, curious, asked what our relationship was. I was afraid she would see through it, and didn't want to offend Augustine, so I became nervous and didn't know how to respond. But to my surprise, Augustine calmly and naturally introduced himself. Hello, Auntie. I'm Oriana's boyfriend. My surname is Jean, and my name is Augustine. I froze. Boyfriend. I thought I was just his hidden lover, and maybe it was that very day. As I watched Augustine, no longer in the posture of an authoritative figure, chatting with my mother, smiling gently, with no sign of impatience, that I suddenly felt my heart race, beating like a drum. Chapter 5. When Augustine wants to pamper someone, his subtle and unnoticeable way of doing so is almost impossible to ignore or refuse. He never asks me what I want, yet he always seems to see through my needs. He gives me resources. He gives me connections. He takes me to meet people and never hesitates to introduce me to the outside world. He affectionately calls me Oriana and tells others that he is my boyfriend. Yes, that's right, not I'm his girlfriend, but rather, he, Augustine, is the outside boyfriend of actress Oriana. It's as if the complicated ties in darkness between us existed only in my own anxious mind. Sometimes, when he's busy flying from one place to another, he would still appear unexpectedly on the set when I'm done filming, humorously teasing me. You've lost a bit of weight. Your eyes are bigger now. The next day, specially prepared meals would be delivered to the entire crew. The most interesting thing happened once when he was in the Middle East, with rocket missile systems overhead nearly exploding like popcorn. He still remembered to call me on video, reminding me to get some rest so I'd have enough energy for filming the next day. Boom, boom. The deafening noises echoed outside, faint flashes of fire visible in the distance. But to Augustine, there was only one disapproving line. Oriana, it's already 2 in the morning in China. You should go to bed. It was just like something from a drama. Augustine has stood up for me, made a scene, and even crazier, I was kidnapped by his enemies and used as leverage against him. Augustine came to save me, grabbing the half-pulled homemade grenade in my hand, and led me to a bomb-proof area, staying with me through the torturous 3 minutes and 26 seconds. Later, I saw an explanation about the suspension bridge effect, a psychological bias in emotional perception triggered by certain circumstances. There was also a Korean drama term for it, called the blockbuster effect. Because the experience was so overwhelming, it became unforgettable, and after that, it was difficult to see any other man's state experience as comparable. Looking back now, if Augustine truly had feelings for someone, something like exposing his vulnerabilities to be kidnapped and threatened by his enemies would never have happened in the first place. Fortunately, I wasn't someone who wore my emotions on my sleeve back then. I was a bit insecure, a bit complicated. I would often doubt myself, torn between whether it was real or not, and it was during this time that a woman appeared in Augustine's life. She made me take a step back from the edge of the cliff before I could sink any deeper into the mire. Chapter 6. She was a newly debuted actress. Her name was Carmen. Like me in my early days, she encountered Augustine at her most helpless and most courageous moment, meeting the most powerful man. Over the years, there have been many women who used various means to get close to Augustine. There were bright, charming, innocent, pure, and even those who tried to copy the method I once successfully used. But few succeeded. It wasn't that I was overly confident in any promises Augustine had made to me, or naively thought he was saving himself for me. It was simply because Augustine was too busy. He couldn't spare the time. His business was vast and extensive, and the scale of what he had built couldn't have been achieved without his direct involvement. This prevented him from becoming the typical CEO from a novel, someone who just sits in their high-rise office every day, overlooking the city. Moreover, Augustine wasn't particularly interested in the extravagant lifestyle. More often than not, he preferred to sit back on the collapsed sofa, enjoying a moment of relaxation. So, this Carmen became another unexpected development. When Augustine first brought her back, many people said I was about to lose favor. He arranged for her to stay in a different place. Just like me, he gave her resources, connections, and helped her rise quickly in the entertainment industry. Though we had heard of each other, we had never met in person. However, in the entertainment industry, you cross paths with people all the time. Before long, the two of us bumped into each other on a set. I wasn't sure how Carmen usually interacted with Augustine, but I knew that when Augustine wanted to pamper someone, he made them feel as though he was willing to give them the world. Compared to those wealthy patrons with bizarre preferences and crude words, it was truly a world of difference. On top of that, Augustine was good-looking and usually easygoing. Carmen must have taken it seriously. During filming, she deliberately made mistakes and even suggested to the director that, for authenticity, she should slap me as the script called for. The director was in a difficult position, as we were both connected to the same patron, and he didn't want to offend either of us. This made Carmen unhappy, so she called Augustine right there to complain. I overheard her intentionally loud phone call, and then I heard Augustine's low voice comforting her. "Okay, I understand." It sounded like she had received some kind of promise. After hanging up the phone, Carmen looked at me with a "let's see what happens" expression. She was clearly determined. At that moment, I truly thought Augustine would stand up for her, especially since that "okay, I understand" had sounded so gentle. Even the director couldn't help but sigh, saying old is not as good as new. That night, I spent the entire evening nervously clutching my phone. But to my surprise, the next morning, Carmen and the producer who brought her in were both removed from the production, and news of them disappeared from the industry. A few days later, Augustine came to visit me on set and took me home. While waiting for a red light, he suddenly asked me, "Oriana, what kind of compensation do you want?" Compensation? Was he talking about Carmen? I turned my head to look at him, his tall figure bathed in golden light from the street lamp. In that moment, my mind involuntarily flashed back to Carmen's tear-streaked face as she left. She had knelt in front of me, holding my skirt, desperately pleading, "Oriana, Oriana, I was wrong. I shouldn't have targeted you. I shouldn't have been so petty. Please, let me meet Mr. Jean. Please, I still have debts to pay. I can't leave the industry. My family is waiting for me to support them. Please, let him spare me this time. I know I was wrong." Chapter 7. If you ask me if I feel satisfied? Yes, I do. Because who doesn't like a good slap in the face moment? If you ask me if I'm happy? No, I'm not. Because Carmen's ending, isn't it my future as well? Augustine Jean is like a poppy flower. He lures you in with a life of luxury and indulgence, making you addicted, and once you've fallen deep into it, he coldly tells you that it's not his true nature, but our own greed that led us to believe it. When he's willing, he gives you a bit of love. When he's not, you're nothing. So, I shouldn't have been so repeatedly doubtful, questioning whether he was sincere with me. What I needed to do was simply lower my gaze and softly say, "No need, Mr. Jean. I don't want the money. I just want you to come back." And that's how I've stayed by his side year after year. He helped me go from having nothing to accumulating wealth, from being young and naive to being at ease. Now, it's the 8th year I've known Augustine. When he had his assistant handle the matters with the women around him, I saw the news that he had gotten engaged to a wealthy heiress. The engagement ceremony was grand, with many politicians among the guests. Augustine, dressed in a well-tailored suit, looked exceptionally imposing. His lips curved into an appropriate smile, and in his arm, there was a hand belonging to his soon-to-be wife. In the video, they greeted the guests together. While talking, they occasionally exchanged glances and smiles. But more often, it was Augustine turning his head to look at her tenderly. It looked so harmonious and warm, both in terms of background and temperament. They seemed a perfect match. I couldn't quite express the feeling in my heart as I watched the video. There was a tinge of bitterness, and also a sense of emptiness and numbness. It was probably like flipping to the ending of a serialized novel unexpectedly, right when it's supposed to be a happy ending, or like getting a text message while eating alone, eagerly opening it, only to find it's just a greeting from the service provider. I had once wondered what I would do when Augustine truly had someone he liked or was getting married. Should I leave voluntarily? Or should I take the chance to make some money? But after thinking it through, there was no real answer. With Augustine's position, as long as he doesn't want to, no one can rush him into marriage. Unlike me, every time I go back to see my mother, I'm always nagged with, "Oriana, you've been with Augustine for so many years. Why aren't you getting married? Doesn't he want to?" Of course, I can't tell her that Augustine has never considered marriage. So I just grit my teeth and say, "Mom, I want to act. It's me who doesn't want to." I know my mom isn't oblivious. After all, as a mother, she can sense when something's off with her daughter. But in the end, she sighed and chose to comfort me, saying, "Sweetheart, if you're unhappy outside, just come home. Mom will take care of you." I held her in silence, tears falling into her embrace. I used to think Augustine would never get married, at least not until today, because in all these years, I've heard plenty of rumors about him, like how he was building a love nest with an award-winning actress, and their wedding was just around the corner, or how he was in a hot relationship with a rising star, and the woman was clearly pregnant. There were even reports about him being involved with an heiress, and some unknown newcomers. But whether the rumors were true or not, or whether Augustine was involved or not, the gossip would fade away in a few days, forgotten by everyone. From my perspective, I had been caught in the paparazzi many times with my out-of-the-loop boyfriend. Online, people had all kinds of guesses about him. Some thought he was a man in his 40s. Others thought he was a 20-year-old trophy model. He would merely raise an eyebrow and laugh it off. As long as his photo wasn't published, he didn't care at all. Of course, no one dared to publish his photo. Augustine never bothered with these rumors. And naturally, he never explained anything to me. I thought he was like this with everyone, and never imagined that one day, he would actively handle his own rumors. I think this time, Augustine might be serious. Chapter 8. He had his assistant pay off those girls with hush money. Some wanted money. As long as the money is right, everything can be discussed. Some wanted power. "You help me handle this, and I'll keep quiet." There were also those who wanted a bit of Augustine's love. "Augustine, I really like you. I just want to stay by your side. Please don't reject me, okay?" They were confused. The consequences and outcome would likely be no different from Carmen's back then. When it was my turn, I waited for several days. I spent nights tossing and turning, unable to sleep. But the call from the assistant never came. I thought they might have forgotten about me. Just as I was about to call them myself, I received a call from Augustine. It was from him personally. He gave me an address and asked me to come over. I nervously changed into a new outfit and rehearsed in my mind over and over what I should say when I got there. But when I opened the door, I was met with a shy yet radiant smile. It was Augustine's fiancée, Karen. I knew her. No, to be precise, I had done some research on her. Karen's grandfather was a 3-star general from a certain military district. Her parents were the typical example of a union between the political and business worlds. Over the years, Augustine had shifted his business focus towards a more legitimate path, wanting to go deeper. Marrying Karen was understandable. He called me over today because his fiancée liked me. Yes, purely liked me. Karen, Miss Oriana, you're really beautiful. No wonder they say many stars don't look as good on camera. The lens doesn't even capture half of your beauty. I smiled and replied, thank you. You're beautiful too. It wasn't all politeness. She truly was stunning, not in the usual, jaw-dropping way you'd find in the entertainment industry, but with a remarkable presence. That innate aura she carried, something I could never outshine. No matter how grand my clothes or how rich my character was on screen, Karen had the type of personality that made people feel at ease. A happy, energetic type. She never let the conversation die down. Even my usually talkative self seemed a little reserved around her. The dinner was light-hearted, with laughter ringing out from time to time. Karen even asked about my relationship with Augustine. Oriana, how did you meet Augustine? Although Augustine hadn't mentioned it before, I knew this was the moment when I should say we were just ordinary friends. But Augustine spoke before I could. She's my ex-girlfriend. His voice was still steady and calm. Oriana is my ex-girlfriend. We were once in a relationship. The polite smile on my face nearly froze, and my hand by my side tightened. I didn't know how to react. Karen, however, merely responded with a nonchalant "oh" and said indifferently, I see. That's too bad. Too bad. She wasn't being sarcastic. She genuinely didn't care. And yet, that made it more humiliating than a slap in the face. At the time, I didn't quite understand what she was really regretting. After the meal, she kindly said she had other things to attend to and quickly left. It wasn't until I got home, sitting on the balcony, lighting a cigarette, that I suddenly understood. Through the smoke swirling around me, it became clear. Karen liked Augustine. The way she looked at him was so familiar. It reminded me of myself when I first felt that way. But Karen's feelings for Augustine were genuine, and her indifference was real too. Augustine's calmness, in fact, was identical to the way he had introduced himself as my boyfriend to my mom back then. He didn't care. They didn't care to lie, because in their circle, there was no need to fabricate lies to achieve their goals. Compared to my insecure, sensitive, and disguised feelings, Karen seemed like the true companion to Augustine. After asking that question, she saw my discomfort and, to ease the atmosphere, even casually mentioned that she dated quite a few boyfriends while studying in the UK. I've always known that I won't end up marrying any of them. Marriage is never something I can control, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying love before marriage. It's okay, Miss Oriana. I don't mind. You don't need to take it too seriously. Karen said she liked one of my performances very much. She thought my character, the second female lead, was so devoted to the male lead that it was heartbreaking. It was the male lead's fault for not recognizing me. That drama was called the Daisy Chronicles. Daisy was the name of the female lead in the script. It had nothing to do with me. It was a role Augustine had offered me back when I had just joined him. At that time, my acting wasn't great. I wasn't professionally trained, and my earlier performances weren't anything to write home about. This role was what truly helped me break through. The first time I really appeared in the public's eye. Back then, there were people who asked, Oriana, how did you suddenly get so good at acting? You've improved so much. Some fans came up with excuses for me. This proves that unrequited love is what our sister thrives on. But no one knew. I was 20 then, both afraid of Augustine and addicted to his endless kindness toward me. In that mix of fear and longing, I was able to perfectly present this role. Chapter 9. Finally, Augustine and I sat down at the negotiating table. A long-awaited spring rain arrived with it. The dramatic confrontation I had imagined never came to pass. Augustine, as usual, returned to the villa and quietly sat with me to finish dinner. Then, he looked at me gently and asked, Oriana, what do you want? I knew this day would eventually come. I didn't expect, however, that after all these years, it would feel so ordinary and simple. I thought for a moment. I had spent 7 years by his side. During these 7 years, Augustine had always been generous with me. Gold, silver, jewelry, limited edition bags. Most importantly, the resources and connections he gave me provided me with endless wealth. My savings and tax payments had reached figures that an ordinary person could never even dream of. At first, all I wanted was to get my mom the treatment she needed and improve our lives. Now, If you ask me what I want, I can't really come up with a good answer. What's most important is that I no longer want to say some polite phrase like I don't want money. Just want you. So, I asked him for 4 properties and 3 luxury cars. Augustine wasn't surprised by this. His dark eyes met mine, and his tone was calm as he said, "This property can be yours as well. Additionally, I'll have someone transfer 70 million to your account." Look, he always knew how to be so graceful and considerate, making it impossible to refuse his thoughtfulness. I responded quietly and properly. "Thank you. I don't need this property. If possible, please just transfer everything to my account." Upon hearing this, Augustine raised his gaze to look at me. His jaw relaxed. His hands casually crossed in front of him, still composed, neither asking why nor saying anything further. He nodded, raised his hand to call for his assistant, and arranged everything. Before he left, he said, "If you need anything, you can always call my assistant." With that, he straightened his sleeve and left without another word. The rain had started lightly since earlier. It pattered softly against the glass, the beads of water falling like pearls, making the whole courtyard feel emptier. This villa was already small and insignificant compared to Augustine's other properties. But back then, I really liked it, because the yard had a row of phoenix trees, which reminded me of the stories about the phoenix trees in Nanjing I had heard when I was little. Too bad I was called Oriana, not Song Meiling. It only took a few seconds for me to walk from the study to the courtyard. Perhaps the rain had lessened, or maybe it didn't matter. I overheard a question from his assistant. "Mr. Jean, why not have Miss Oriana sign a non-disclosure agreement? After all, she's been with you for 7 years, the longest one. If she makes a scene at your wedding with Miss Karen, it might be." But as the sound of the rain faded into the distance, Augustine's calm voice came through. "It's fine. She won't dare." I smiled bitterly, a self-deprecating laugh escaping me. So in Augustine's mind, he always thought I wouldn't dare. The truth was, I wouldn't. Though I was timid and hesitant, I would never let myself lose who I am or live in a way that makes me miserable. Chapter 10. Leaving Augustine was as simple as when I was first sent to his side. I told the butler to take my things and throw away what I didn't need. The next morning, I left that garden villa. I thought I'd be mourning this decision for days, reflecting on the past with sadness. After all, 7 years. It's not easy to say goodbye, no matter how easily one says it. But reality gave me a harsh lesson. Back-to-back work, endorsements, and press conferences kept me constantly busy. Finally, when I had a moment to catch my breath, I picked up my phone, only to see the news of Augustine's marriage to Karen. Before I could even react, my manager took the phone from me and urged me to walk the red carpet. On the day of Augustine's wedding, both he and I made the trending list at the same time, but one was on the entertainment channel, and the other on the public news. Oriana, red carpet look. Oriana, goddess descending, promoting new drama. He family wedding, new son-in-law is, business and political marriage. Our photos appeared on different pages. The roles had shifted. I was now in the limelight, while he was in his world of tenderness. After this busy period, I still didn't have time to rest, because my mom's illness flared up again. I spent a huge amount of money on her treatment. I hired the best medical team for her. Money flowed like water, yet it never seemed enough. But in the end, I couldn't save her. My mom told me that death wasn't scary, but what she feared was that I would be left alone in this world. Sweetheart, I never wanted you to earn money for the family. I only wish for you to be happy. It's all my fault. Not being able to do better and burdening you, making you so sad. I held her hand as it drooped, crying until I couldn't speak. When I went back to our old house to clean up her belongings, I found that she had already prepared my New Year's red envelope. Inside, there was 2,000 yuan, money that wasn't transferred from my account to hers. It was what she had saved up little by little from doing odd jobs. Holding the bright red envelope in my hands, I suddenly felt overwhelmed with grief. I couldn't understand how, after these 7 years, I had worked so hard to earn so much money that I couldn't even spend it all. Yet I couldn't keep my own mother with me. So, I withdrew for a while. I canceled all my collaborations. I packed my bag and set out on my own journey. I didn't go to the world's tourist hotspots. Instead, I went to Mexico, traveled through Central America, passed through Colombia, and then into South America. When I passed through Venezuela, I had issues with my visa and was taken into a small detention room, facing a group of people interrogating me in a foreign language. I found myself surprisingly calm. I sat steadily in the chair, presenting my statements clearly. The cold, composed posture of my hands crossed in front of me felt like a shadow of another person. I think I had uncovered another version of myself. Along the way, I recorded vlogs and posted them on short video platforms. At first, fans and strangers alike didn't understand what I was doing. No acting, no replies to comments, just trudging through mountains and crossing rivers alone in the wilderness. But later, they walked with me through the highest capital, through the driest lands, and to the ends of the earth. Gradually, the screen was filled with comments. Oriana, remember to bring me freedom. This topic once again made the trending list. It sparked a discussion among netizens about life. By the time I reached my final stop, I was back in the East District. With the New Year's red envelope my mom left me, I bought a nearly obsolete popsicle from a small neighborhood supermarket in an old residential area. Then, I sat under a shady tree, slowly savoring it. When the popsicle melted and the sun set, I patted the dust off my pants. In the afterglow of the sunset, I never looked back again. Chapter 11. After that day, I moved all my business from the front stage to behind the scenes. At first, there were many things I didn't understand, and I encountered backstabbing and suppression once again. But I was quick to act, negotiating with ease, sitting casually at the table with a gentle smile, but taking no prisoners in my actions. It felt as if I had suddenly found the life that suited me best. The next time I saw Augustine was when I was drinking with a CEO, discussing a collaboration and profit-sharing deal. Yes, by coincidence, he was also there doing business. He probably hadn't seen me drunk before. I never dared to drink much in front of him. I was afraid of losing my composure, afraid that alcohol would loosen my tongue and I might spill my emotions. We bumped into each other on the way to the bathroom. Thinking about it now, I'm sure it was intentional on Augustine's part. It had been more than a year since we last saw each other. I once thought that when I saw him again, I would feel awkward, embarrassed, and distant. But when the moment actually came, it felt more like seeing an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a while. It was so easy. I nodded lightly, gave him my usual smile, squinted my eyes, and said, "Long time no see, Augustine." That day, Augustine escorted me back to the private room. He didn't leave. Instead, he sat down under the delighted gaze of the CEO. Hey, if I'd known Ms. Oriana was the CEO's friend, I wouldn't have hesitated. No problem. Let's stick with the plan. 70-30 split. Tomorrow morning. No, I'll have my assistant sign the contract right away. I turned my head, propped my arm up, and looked at Augustine. I noticed his brow was relaxed, his expression the same as usual, but the curve of his lips was slightly flattened. He was angry. But what was he angry about? Maybe in the past, I would have spent the whole night overthinking it. Now, I just thought it was a simple emotion. Chapter 12. I didn't refuse Augustine's help. His presence made this collaboration incredibly simple. It reminded me of a TV drama I once acted in. In the storyline where the female lead falls in love, she always receives the male lead's help at critical moments. Becoming a legend. Back then, the internet was full of criticism. What the hell is this so-called big female lead? She still needs a man to save her? Laughable. Real big female leads rely on themselves. Okay? But from the male perspective, the male lead, who relies on his father, mother, or wife to get ahead, is praised for being a true big male lead. At that time, I thought, I'd rather not be the lead. Why refuse an easy solution? After leaving the hotel, I stood by the road. Augustine came out of the main door, looking down at me and asking, "Where are you going? Let me give you a ride." I looked at his elegant features under the moonlight and couldn't help but laugh. "You've forgotten. Now I'm someone who has a car and a driver when I go out." Augustine froze for a moment. It was rare to see him out of his element. He paused, then asked, "Did you sell everything I gave you?" Yes. I nodded. The houses had depreciated in value over the years, and the cars would only lose more value if kept. So I figured it was better to cash them in and let them go to a better place. Augustine was silent for a moment before speaking again. Maybe the evening breeze had cooled him down, or maybe it was just the way he sounded. But his voice came out a bit hoarse. Why didn't you call me before? Call him? For a moment, I almost misunderstood. Then, it hit me. He was referring to the time when I had encountered some trouble and didn't reach out to him for help. After all, he had left me with a message: if you need anything, you can always call my assistant. How should I respond? I smiled faintly and said, CEO. I don't know if you've heard that saying online, a good ex should be as good as dead, right? Chapter 13. Augustine didn't say anything. After that night, we never saw each other again. I threw myself wholeheartedly into my career, and my success grew steadily. Meanwhile, Augustine turned to politics. His shift in identity and status also changed the direction of his career. In the East District, with his departure, I gradually became his replacement. The first thing I did after gaining a solid foothold was to acquire those film companies that posed as entertainment businesses while actually engaging in side operations. For those who agreed to sell to me, I settled every penny of the account. For those who refused, they couldn't blame me for using certain methods to get what I wanted, taking the lion's share without lifting a finger. As for the girls under my name, I made sure every single contract they signed was clean and straightforward. Over time, every female celebrity, no matter how big or small, facing shady contracts, willingly came to me. In the entertainment industry, many things don't need to be explicitly said. Fans will fill in the blanks. Thus, those dirty dealings that the capital couldn't shake began to be exposed to the public eye. Spring passed, and autumn came, the scorching heat and the cold winters, until one day, while I was negotiating a deal, a girl suddenly stumbled and fell at my feet in a panic. Before the bodyguards could surround us, she grabbed my sleeve tightly, mustering all her courage, her eyes burning with desperation as she looked at me, pleading, "Please, help me." I looked down at her, noticing the light makeup, the simple white dress she wore, and the fear and clumsy acting that were immediately apparent. I smiled and asked her, "What's your name?" She replied, "My name is Oriana." Sis, we have the same name. I'm also called Oriana. Extra Chapter 1, Augustine. Augustine admitted it. When he first accepted Oriana, he thought she was truly interesting. She reminded him of a cat he had found when he was a child. She was terrified, but still, for the sake of food, she nervously exposed her belly to show him affection. Augustine also admitted that, over time, he truly developed feelings for Oriana, which was why he eventually chose to replace her with Carmen, because, for him, falling in love with a girl was something he never allowed himself to do. It would make him passive. It would create weaknesses. It would make him unable to be ruthless. This didn't align with his life plan. In his eyes, women and money were no different. If he wanted something, he could fight for it. Once it was in his hands, it was meant to be enjoyed, not to be a burden. But Augustine could never understand why. The day Carmen called him, he got so angry. He was angry at Oriana for not using her position to her advantage, for not bullying others when she could. He was also angry at her for not making use of her resources. That was why, when he picked her up that day, he asked, "What kind of compensation do you want?" After hearing Oriana's answer, Augustine, instead of being angry, laughed. She was mad. She was really riled up. Extra Chapter 2, Augustine. When Augustine first decided to get married, he didn't take it seriously. He was destined to rise. That was part of his career plan. Marrying Karen was simply a step in that plan. But the higher he climbed, the cleaner he needed to be. He dismissed the women who had been around him and dealt with the scandals. But not for Karen. He didn't stop it because, in a way, it would create misunderstandings. And those misunderstandings could bring him some benefits. Oriana's answer didn't surprise him. He knew that Oriana liked him. So, he thought it didn't matter. Without one Oriana, he could always find another replacement. But Augustine later realized that things weren't as under his control as he thought. One evening, After a social event, he returned home. His throat was dry from drinking, and instinctively, he called out, "Oriana, pour me a glass of water." When he saw Karen appear, he froze for the first time. Although Karen understood and forgave him, Augustine felt he shouldn't be this way. He wasn't a man of many affections. He understood responsibility. Since he had married Karen, he should give her the respect she deserved. But he couldn't stop thinking about Oriana. He couldn't tell if it was indulgence or him making excuses for himself. One night, almost by impulse, he dialed her number but couldn't get through. Oriana had changed her number, her address, and even sold everything that was related to him. It was as if she was clearly cutting ties with him for good. Augustine suddenly felt a rage he couldn't suppress. He had someone track her down. What he found, however, was news of her traveling the world, alone with a backpack. Oriana's mother's death didn't surprise him. He had known from the beginning that her illness would relapse once treated. And for Augustine, life and death were part of the inevitable, and he didn't feel much about it. So, he began to secretly follow Oriana's life through short videos. Through her vlogs, he saw her walking across mountains, and for the first time, he realized she was quite good at socializing, passionate, and persistent. He watched her climb snowy mountains alone, trek through the wilderness, and walk past Syria, finding a Damascus rose among the ruins. She seemed like a completely different person from the Oriana he once knew. In Augustine's memory, Oriana had always been a little spoiled. So when he saw these moments, he even began to doubt. Was the Oriana he had been with the real her? Or was it a facade? Was she pretending? Or was she afraid of him? But Augustine prided himself on his ability to read people. And logically, he shouldn't have been mistaken, until he found an old interview with Oriana. In that interview, she was laughing and talking cheerfully, saying, "If I like someone, I'll be really spoiled. I'll like to act weak, to be coquettish." Augustine couldn't help but laugh. Then he paused and wondered, when exactly did she stop being so spoiled? It was probably when he brought Carmen home. Later on, Augustine finally watched the last video of Oriana as she updated her feed. At the moment the screen went black, he knew she had grown distant from him. The things he had built around her over the years were nothing more than the superficial illusions of the upper class. She had seen the world, experienced freedom. She was no longer a caged bird that he could easily snatch. Augustine felt both relief and frustration. He was relieved to hear that Oriana had become ruthless, cleaning up the internal affairs. He also had the vanity of an ordinary man. It was probably like this: "The roses I raise naturally bear my mark." He was frustrated, however, to hear that Oriana had not been affected by their past relationship, and had started a new public relationship. Even when he secretly used his influence to expose her past with him, she was unbothered. It was then that Augustine realized the fundamental difference between Oriana and himself. How to describe it? Maybe it was like that day when he was about to send Oriana home. He had intended to reconcile with her, to start over. If she refused, he could always use force to impose his will. After all, to him, there was nothing he couldn't have if he wanted it. But Oriana refused him. Yet, as she was about to leave, she suddenly looked at him with a bright, beautiful smile, her eyes crinkling as she said one sentence. She said, "Augustine, don't think I'm being too sentimental, okay?" Just like that night, she chattered on beside him. "I recently learned a phrase: look at my past experiences, understand my struggles and lows, and give me hope and a new beginning. I think this is the distance that suits us best." What did that mean? It meant, "Thank you for the help you once gave me, but I hope we never meet again in the future."